Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and good morning. Welcome to Michigan-China Forum 2022 Annual Summit. I'm Zihan, the co-president of Michigan-China Forum 2022. At the very beginning, I would like to deliver the highest appreciation and thankfulness to all guests and audience participating today. It is our great honor to invite all of you to share your valued opinions and constructive insights here. On behalf of Michigan-China Forum 2022, I would also like to express appreciation to the supports from all of our sponsors and collaborators. Thank you. I also want to remind everyone that we have a translation button at the right bottom of the Zoom page. If you want a Chinese simultaneous translation, you can click on the Chinese channel. 如果您需要中文同声传译服务的话，您可以点击 Zoom 界面右下方的地球图标，也就是 Interpretation 翻译按钮，选择中文频道。Thank you. Founded and registered officially at the Rouse School of Business in 2016, Michigan-China Forum set a core mission as connecting Michigan with China. We served as a platform for students and young professionals across different cultures to gain insights, dispel bias, and engage in inspiring dialogues. This year, we will take building an innovative and integrated new world as our main topic, including 4 sub-panels: new development of the smart city, new fashion in the medical field, new breakthroughs in the cultural and film industry, and new rules of the financial market. We will discuss the chain of technological and institutional innovation and integrated development in frontier fields of China and the United States under the new situation. Except for thousands of young scholars and professionals from US and China, we are also honored to invite 3 guests to join today's opening ceremony. Let's give applause to Mr. Zhao Jian, Consul General of China in Chicago, Mrs. Francine LaFontaine, the Dean of Rouse School of Business, University of Michigan, Mr. Pan Qingzhong, the Executive Dean of Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University. Welcome. Now, I'm honored and grateful to introduce our first speaker, who will deliver the opening speech for our summit. Let's give applause to Mr. Zhao Jian, Consul General of China in Chicago. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is my great pleasure to attend the Michigan-China Forum, hosted by the University of Michigan. 50 years ago, the Chinese table tennis team was invited to visit Michigan. The University of Michigan witnessed the ping-pong diplomacy between China and the US and made positive contributions to the normalization of China-US relations. 50 years later, the University of Michigan has become one of the top universities in the US that have attracted the largest number of Chinese students. The Michigan-China Forum, initiated in 2017, has been playing an active role in enhancing academic exchanges between China and the US, as well as promoting mutual understanding between our 2 peoples. I wish this year's forum a full success. This year marks the 50th anniversary of President Nixon's visit to China and the issuance of the Shanghai Communique. In the past 50 years, great changes have taken place in China and the United States, as well as in the world. But the importance of China-US relations is rising day by day instead of falling, and the common interests of the Chinese and American people are also increasing instead of decreasing. Both China and the US stand to gain from cooperation and lose from confrontation. Our bilateral relations not only affect the interests of our 2 peoples, but also the prosperity and stability of the world. The coordination and cooperation between China and the US are almost indispensable in dealing with various global and regional challenges, like promoting the world economic growth, fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, tackling climate change, and solving various regional hotspot issues. To treat China as an adversary or enemy, to implement a policy of decoupling, sanctions, containment, and even initiate a new Cold War against China will definitely spell a disaster for both countries and the whole world. During the video conversation with President Biden, Chinese President Xi Jinping pointed out that China and the US should adhere to the principle of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation, so as to put China-US relations back on the healthy track, charting the future course for the development of our bilateral relations. The economies of China and the US are highly complementary to each other, each having its own characteristics and advantages in innovation, and there are huge potentials for cooperation between the two sides. The theme of today's forum is innovation and integration of a new ecology, which provides a very good opportunity for all of us to think of our two countries' coordination and cooperation in the above-mentioned area. President Xi Jinping pointed out that technological innovation is an important engine for the development of a human society and a powerful weapon to deal with global challenges. If China and the US could work together to promote innovation and integration, it would bring benefits to the whole mankind. At present, a new round of scientific and technological revolution and industrial transformation is developing in depth, with information technology, biotechnology, and manufacturing technology all progressing well underway, which provides a guarantee for promoting economic growth and coping with challenges such as major epidemics, climate change, and natural disasters. China and the US should work together to accelerate scientific and technological innovation and institutional innovation, promote the transformation of scientific and technological achievements into productivity, and cultivate new momentum for economic development. Green and low-carbon development is the right path for innovative growth. The green and low-carbon cooperation between China and the US is not only an effective way to achieve emission reduction targets respectively, but also an important area for strengthening China-US economic and trade cooperation. China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. China's green and low-carbon transition, combined with the advantages of a super-large domestic market, will provide huge development opportunities for China-US economic and trade cooperation. Innovation requires an open environment, and openness is the right approach to achieve prosperity and progress of human society. Both China and the US should be broad-minded, follow the underlying trend of the times, and proactively expand opening up. Both sides should advance trade and investment liberalization and facilitation, work for stable and efficient industrial and supply chains, and promote the orderly flow of resources so as to boost economic recovery and integrated development. China and the US should jointly promote the building of an open world economy create an open, just, and non-discriminatory environment for scientific and technological innovation so as to fully unleash the vitality of the world economy. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the Chinese economy enjoys a good momentum of development. Last year, China's GDP grew by around 8%, and our total economic volume reached 114 trillion RMB yuan, accounting for more than 18% of the global economy. China is striving to foster a new development paradigm with domestic circulation as the mainstay and domestic and international circulations reinforcing each other. China will stay committed to deepening reform and opening up. From January 1st, 2022, China began implementing the new version of negative list for foreign investment and foreign investment in pilot free trade zones, further deepening the opening up of the manufacturing sector, expanding foreign investment access in service trade, and implementing national treatment for foreign-funded enterprises. On the same day, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement entered into force, and the world's largest free trade zone officially set sail. China has a huge market of more than 1.4 billion people and is steadily advancing the common prosperity of the entire population. The middle income group is continuously expanding, which will create broad cooperation opportunities for companies from all over the world, including those from the United States. As the Chinese saying goes, a good start in spring will ensure the success of the whole year. Spring is full of vigor and vitality. Spring symbolizes opportunity and possibility. We look forward to working with friends from all walks of life in Michigan and the US to explore opportunities for exchanges and cooperation between China and the US in various fields like trade, investment, innovation, culture, and education, and contributing more to the common prosperity of our two countries and the world, as well as the well-being of our two people and the people in the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhao. It is our great honor to have you here. As a platform who aims at facilitating conversation between top institutions, we put the leadership and innovation based on the exchange as our priority. Next, let's welcome Mrs. Francine Lafontaine, the Dean of Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, and Mr. Pan Qingzhong, the Executive Dean of Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University, to bring us speeches. Welcome, Dean Lafontaine, and welcome, Dean Pan. Firstly, let's invite Dean Lafontaine to give us a welcome remark on behalf of Ross School of Business.
Good evening, and I know good morning for a number of you as well. My name is Francine Lafontaine. Thank you for the introduction, Zihan. I am currently serving as Dean of the Ross School of Business. I am delighted that our students have put together this wonderful event, the Michigan-China Forum Summit of 2022, which is an ongoing series now put together every year by our students. In addition to being able to welcome you to this event, I have the pleasure of serving as a faculty member at the business school as well, and a business economics faculty member in particular. So listening in to the General Counsel's talk about innovation and its importance in driving the well-being of populations of people everywhere around the world is a topic that I am enthusiastically supportive of, and I am very pleased that the students have put together an event that includes discussion of innovation in different industries, whether it be healthcare and digitization, which will be discussed later, or smart cities, or innovation in the finance sector, which will also be part of this conference. I hope that you will be able to attend all of the different segments, not only this weekend, but next weekend as well. I am sure that all of this will lead us to a lot of interesting discussion, thinking about how to best deploy various technologies to make sure that when we create new ways of engaging, we actually make sure that all of the people, and in different parts of the world, as well as within society, different groups, all get to benefit from what we develop, the way that we put it forward, and the various mechanisms and ideas that flow from it over time. It is really important in order to unleash all the possibilities of these technologies that we seriously think about the benefits and the costs and how those are distributed across different populations, across different groups, across different individuals. But ultimately, innovation is our path to address very important problems in the world, including, as the General Counsel mentioned, issues related to the climate change, issues related to the well-being of our populations. Innovation is a central driver of our opportunities. The economic literature is quite clear about how much of our well-being and the growth in our economies have been due to innovation. So this conference, in my mind, embodies a recognition of the role of technology in a way that has a very positive impact on people. And it also allows us to talk about technology across cultures. And again, that is central to our capacity to deploy these technologies in the best possible way. So let me not say much more than that, since I will have the opportunity to talk again a little bit later, but just simply say a big thank you to all of the people that have been involved in organizing this wonderful conference, and to all of you for being here and being part of this conversation, which allows us to get to know each other, to develop ideas together, and to just grow as a community in the best possible way. So thank you for engaging in this dialogue and information sharing session. And with that, I will turn it over back to our host, Zihan.
Thank you so much, Dean LaFontaine. We really appreciate the sharing. Next, let's invite Dean Pan to give us another speech. Hi, Dean Pan.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Dean Pan, welcome.
Thank you, Zihan. Good morning, good evening, distinguished guests, Mr. Zhao Jian, Dean LaFontaine. Very nice to see you, and thank you so much, everyone, and the organizers, and also our future young leaders from China, from Michigan, from all over the world. Mr. Zhao Jian and Dean LaFontaine, you covered everything almost. So, being the last one, so I nothing to say here. But I just see from another side a few words. Talking about the China-U.S. relationship is 50 years ago, as Mr. Zhao Jian mentioned, in the China-U.S. had the contacts. That year, I was 9 years old. I did not see President Nixon, but I saw his wife, Mrs. Nixon, in Beijing, and when she visits the elementary school. that year I was a third grade of elementary school. You know, that's the first time I saw foreigners, and that's my 9 years old already. But today, 50 years past, we can see a lot of people coming from the world to China, and the Chinese people, Chinese young scholars, students go anywhere of the world. So that is so open, mixed right after the reform and opening up. Dean LaFontina, you know, the Ross Business School and Schwarzman College, we have a very good relationship, and we have 7 scholars from Michigan. And our founding dean, David Dokui Lee, spent 7 years being the faculty, like you, being the faculty in University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And also our executive director, Amy Sturzberg, in New York office, graduated from Michigan. And back to the 2014, in China, more than 2,500, I believe, 2,500 students went to Michigan, University of Michigan. You can see we have changed a lot since 1972, and very strong relationship yesterday and today. So being the young leaders and everyone here, our scholars, and in the future in your hand. So we have to make that the relationship stronger. That's my first point. The second, as Dean LaFontaine mentioned and addressed, so we are facing a lot of challenges from climate change, from inequality, from conflict, a lot, but based on what? Based on understanding each other, based on take action together. And for our young leaders, our scholars, all these challenges we cannot face in my age, and in your hand, in your age, and in the future. So being the leaders, I want to see, innovation is our topic in our forum, is an excellent forum. And what we should have. The first one, I think, is a vision. You know, because of a vision, you know, our Ross Business School founded almost 85 years ago, over 80 years, right? So as a business, we're doing business. And after the Industrial Revolution, we need the management. And also there's a few, we can see the founder is Steve Ross, right? Is to make $100 million US, make a donation. And here, Schwarzman College, the Schwarzman, Steve, also the first name is Steve, and they make $100 million to initiate this program. And so they have a vision. They want to cultivate the young leaders, future leaders for the future. And by the way, you know, there's the both first name is Steve, and so any scholars, your name is Steve, probably can approach you to get money from you in the future. And so that's the vision. So a lot of people, they have a vision and they know what we are facing today and also the future. So a lot of things we should do earlier and make it better. So whatever the climate change and innovation, and also the relationship between the countries. And so the first. The second is a passion. So if we want to do any creation or the innovation, we need a passion. And we need to put everything we want to do, based on our interest, based on our responsibilities to do that, put everything. So a lot of our scholars and so active here in the Schwarzman College, you know, they in the just to finish the winter break in the Chinese, the Spring Festival, you know, that after they come back, a few weeks ago, they show a lot of pictures. They went everywhere in China, everywhere. And I believe the more than where I visit. So they have a passion, the passion they want to understand, deeply understand China and understand each other as the group visit. So they do everything with a passion. So that's the second. The third is action. You have a passion, we have to take action. That's I think just mention a lot of things we need to do. Like today's forum, we cover a lot of the topics, pandemic issues, right? Small virus, but make almost the whole world shut down 2 years ago, and we need to take action for everything. And Tsinghua, we have a very the best known tradition we call the action speaks louder than words. 行胜于言. Again, action speaks louder than words. Means take action. So whatever we are facing, but if we understand our responsibilities and fix the challenge we have and take our real action, I think the solution is always there. And we can make any contributions from our educational field and also from our future young leaders. In my last session, you can see we have in China, we have a lot of things to do here since opening up and reform. It's just a part of, it's 50 years, over 40 years, but it's just the beginning. Just the beginning. We always see, as President Xi Jinping said that many times, is we have to never forget our original promise. So that is 不忘初心. And also, we have the quote from 2,500 years ago from Confucius, and we call the virtue never stands alone, and it always has neighbors. 不孤必有邻. So make friendship in the world, and so take action and fighting all the challenges and make friends everywhere. We can work that together. Everything will be better. And thank you so much again, and best wishes. Thank you.
Hi. So continuing on this conversation with Mr. Pan, we were asked to think about how we can continue to grow the collaboration and make our students the best they can be and learn to collaborate across cultures in a context where we are dealing with an epidemic that indeed almost shut down the world 2 years ago. We have picked it back up. So things have been changing over time. We've been dealing with it for 2 years, but things this academic year at the University of Michigan were functioning with masks. I assume that the same is true at your university. But what can we do to really make it as available as possible in the context of this pandemic to our students to just explore the world and explore different cultures was part of the question that we were asked to talk about. So maybe we could start with a bit of a description from Mr. Pan about how the school year has gone. for us, I will say, we already had spring break. We're just a few weeks away from final exams. All the students here will be pleased to know that. Not really. But the semester will be over before we know it. But we've been together. We've been able to hold our classes. I would like to learn a little bit more about how it's been for you at Tsinghua University.
Okay, hi, the Dean Lafontaine, and you're lucky. Your students are lucky. So the final exam just a few weeks. Here will be finished by June 26th, and yeah, so 3 months ahead. And so our scholars are so happy here, and there's a lot of troubles and because of a pandemic, but our scholars 124, total is 150, and 124 are on campus, and from all over the world. They went through hard time, and the quarantine, 21 days quarantine. I'm still in quarantine, so I can, and it's long, it's hard, and it's a challenge, and but they are doing well in this cohort, and there's the sixth cohort already, and we have almost 800 in total, the scholars, and they have a very strong relationship with each other. They are not only learn in the class in the college, and they learn each other. They learn from a society. They learn from their mentors, and also learn from the lifetime long professors, and make in this challenge time. And they are not inactive. They are so active and try to learn everything they can do. And even this morning, very early morning, we have a mentors group through the WeChat, and they share their meeting with our scholars, their mentees, and share their thoughts. And they are working on the healthcare issues. So they active almost daily based. So that's, I think, in the future. I mean, your question, the question sent to us. I wish our the Michigan China Forum can hold more often, not only yearly based, maybe the half year, maybe the quarterly. Yeah, so make more communication. I know, so they need organizers to make efforts, but we can help. We can help. Yeah, thank you.
That's a wonderful idea. I'm sure that the students will be. It fits completely with the theme that they asked us to think about, which is how can we collaborate to an even greater extent despite the pandemic. And I think this pandemic has actually shown us that we can collaborate and learn from each other when we're together. It's great, but we can also do it when we're together on the screen like this. Even though it's not as personal, we can learn a lot from each other in a version like this. And that allows us to have events that are less complicated. We don't have to always make them as long. We can have a discussion about a specific topic and just have a lot of people invited and have a panel or things like that. So I think one of the wonderful consequences of the pandemic, because I always need to have the glass half full as opposed to half empty. That's an expression to mean I want things to be looked at in a positive way. And one of the positive outcomes for higher education and education more generally is that we now have a tool and the capacity and the flexibility or the agility that we can use to do things electronically, remotely, and all around the world simultaneously. It's a bit difficult in terms of time zones. I do understand that we are in very different places in terms of what time of day we're at, but we can communicate still across the distance in a way that we didn't used to be able to. So yeah, that's a benefit of the pandemic so far. We learned this.
Exactly. Yeah, fully, totally agree. Yeah. So, and we can, now we get used to the time difference already. So we don't care about the morning and the evening. So we turn on the machine and we can talk. So
that's right.
Yeah, totally
That's
agree.
wonderful.
Yeah. After a reopen. So my background is our forum, is our lobby, and welcome you, Dean, Lafitine, and also everyone here come to our college and anytime in person. Yeah, and the dining hall is always open for you. So.
Well, thank you. I have been to Beijing a number of times. I really like the city. I'm a big fan of Beijing. I've not visited many other places in China, but I definitely think very highly of Beijing and the time I've spent there. But let me add another way in which collaboration can continue. And in part, you've been talking about this program that is a wonderful program where people all go to your college and learn and live together for the duration of the school year. One of the things that we do is semesters abroad. So our students in the undergraduate program very often take a whole semester and go live somewhere else. The advantage of things like this in the pandemic period, I'm assuming that next year we don't have a pandemic anymore. I just need to, I need to do that for my own well-being. I don't want the pandemic next year. But during this time, we've also noticed that one can travel. It's not a good idea to be continuously traveling, but one can travel somewhere. It was complicated for many of our students also to come this fall. I know that they had to go through lots of different hoops to be able to come, just like you were describing for your college. But they were able to come, and then they stay long enough that it makes the trouble viable. They get over it, and they get all the benefits of learning with other people and learning about other people and becoming open to the rest of the world and thinking about the problems that they have in a new way potentially, or being inspired and developing a new vision as a result of these interactions. So we actually not only sent some of our students abroad this year, we had about 150 of our students who went to 16 different countries this winter term. We also bring in students. So we had 70 this fall that just came for a semester at Ross from 13 countries. And we had 100 from 25 countries come this winter. So this capacity of spending a few months, your program is even better than that, in that people spend the whole time together. But the capacity of people to go and live somewhere else, I think that's a very valuable experience, and something that I think develops a capacity for us to build together. And that's what the theme of this conference is, building a better future together. So, Mr. Pan, I'll give you the last couple of minutes, and then we can return it back to our hosts.
Thank you so much, Dean Lafitine. Yes, I fully agree. And that's why we call it exchange. So there's going abroad and coming in Tsinghua, we have 4,000 international scholars, and Strassman is only 120, but they can also, they can mix on campus. And every year we in Tsinghua we have almost over 2,000 students going abroad and make exchange. They take class in the Michigan and anywhere in the world, the universities. And so there's for the young students, they can understand each other. So the last word I want to say, there's the understanding. There's some of our scholars come to China. There's a lot of them is first time and say, oh, come on. So I come to another more developed countries because of the airport. The infrastructure is so beautiful. But once with some poor areas is the wall, the China is unbalanced. So there's a gap, big gap. So when we deep understanding, and you can find the broad, you will have a broad vision, and not only for China, some areas, some regions, but for the whole world, the same. So today, for the young leaders, we need understanding each other and find the real truth in this world. You know, the social media is like a bomb. So every day you open, there's a lot of news, but a lot of fake news. So we don't know, and we have to make evaluation what is true, what is not, and based on that, and we have a better understanding. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dean. And see you on campus. See you in Beijing.
Or in Ann Arbor. Welcome to you too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Lafontaine. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dean
you.
Pan. We really appreciate your remarkable opinion sharing, and we also hope that we can have more communication like this in the future, maybe in the next year. Yeah. And also on behalf of all members of Michigan China Forum 2022, we hope that you had a really good experience in the opening ceremony, and sincerely wish you a great day. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Next time. Next weekend.
Thank you. See you, Dean
Yes.
Lafontaine. See you in time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so now we are close to the end of the opening ceremony. And next, we are going to have our first sub-panel, the development of smart cities, potentials and challenges. And then I will hand the host to the director of Smart Cities panel, Bingyu, who will introduce the panel for us.
Thank you, Zihan, for your kind introduction of the Smart Cities panel. Honorable panelists and my dear fellows, my name is Bingyu Luo. I'm a senior at the University of Michigan on behalf of the Michigan China Forum. It's my great honor to introduce our first subpanel, the development of smart cities, potentials and challenges. We are wondering how smart transportation facilitates urban development and benefits our society along with other smart infrastructure. As mobility as a service adds new modes of transport to the cities, this panel aims to discuss how the cutting-edge technology and relevant policies in smart cities impact the way we live. In the end, they will also address the hurdles down the road, as well as the opportunities for collaboration lie between. Our panelists include Ms. Carla Balo from the Car Group, Mr. Bruce Bozowski from the Automotive Futures Group, and Professor Xiaotong Sun from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. All of them are U of M alums. The moderator for today's panel is Mr. Bozowski. He's the managing director at the Automotive Futures Group. At the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, Mr. Bozowski authored research reports focusing on a variety of automotive topics, including product development and manufacturer-supplier-dealer relations. Ms. Carla Balo is a leader in engineering and vehicle program management with 35 years of experience in the automotive industry. Prior to joining Car Group, she was most recently the Assistant Vice President for Mobility Research and Business Development at the Ohio State University. Professor Xiaotong Sun is interested in studying planning, management, and control strategies induced by emerging technologies to make more efficient and sustainable transportation systems. She used to be a postdoc research fellow at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. We also feature the function of interpretation in Chinese. Please feel free to use it. 本次论坛提供同声传译服务，欢迎有需要的观众使用。Next, I will hand the host to Mr. Bruce Bozowski, the Managing Director at the Automotive Futures Group. Welcome, Mr. Bozowski.
My microphone is now unmuted. And my video is running and it looks like we're ready to go. Thank you very much. We have with us today two speakers for our about a 2-hour Q&A session here, looking at the issue related to smart cities. As Bingyu said, I'm the managing director of the Automotive Futures Group here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm retired from the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, and I've been working independently for the last 4 years. And the area of my research tends to be focused on advanced powertrains, intelligent transportation systems, where the new mobility and smart cities kind of falls into, and the globalization of the automotive industry. I don't see Carla Belo online yet. Is she here with us?
I'm on my screen.
Hi, Carla.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you both as well.
And Jiotong Sun, welcome as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to start out with a little definition of what we consider smart cities. It could be a lot of things to different people, but I want to start out with each of you telling me what you think, how you consider things, something a smart city. Carla, let's start with you.
Thanks, Bruce. The way I define smart city is really using data and technology to improve people's lives. And a lot of people think, we have great ideas for technology, we can analyze a lot of data, but then, we may develop systems that don't really improve people's quality of life. When I say quality of life, that includes everything from climate to ease of mobility, to better health care, to better jobs, better educational opportunities and outcomes. And so a city that really thrives, to improve all of those basic elements, then has the economic engine to attract more businesses, to attract more residents, and then to thrive as a community. So for me, it's all about the improvement of the citizens' lives and how we can use technology to enable that result.
And transportation is just a piece of the puzzle then, right?
Just a piece, an important piece though, I think, because without access to mobility, you're very limited. You're limited with healthcare, you're limited with fresh food. There's a lot of underserved communities that are food deserts. They're healthcare deserts. It's a means of either going outside of that community or bringing something into that community. And then by doing that, the whole community can be uplifted. The one thing you have to watch out for when you do any kind of initiative in an underserved community is oftentimes that makes the value of those properties go up, and the folks that are living there may have to then move further out. So it's a that you want to try to avoid.
Very good. Thank you, Carla. Xiaotang, can you talk to us a little bit about how you see the definition of smart cities?
Yeah, I actually agree with Carol. She emphasized two things. First is data, which we have rich data right now. And second is goal. As for a better living, not for only 1 or 2 people, but for all the people in the city. And now I will say that could be beyond city, because when we have transportation, we're actually connecting cities and cities, rural areas and urban areas, and that could all be possible. And the thing is, okay, transportation may be just a part of it, and we can see a closer interactions between transportation, healthcare, power systems, communication systems, all of that coming up together. So it means that we need to have better coordination, better cooperation, as well as better management to make the full use of the data and to make a better living of all the people.
Oh, that's you sound that this sounds like a very challenging program.
It is, it indeed is.
Now, when you, Xiaoteng, when you're working in China now, right?
Yes.
You've done some work in the US. You have one of your degrees is from the U of M. How do you see the differences of how the Chinese view smart cities and what we have been doing in the US?
Well, I would say from the view perspectives, the same countries are the same. So both countries have seen the power of data and the potential we can use it. But the difference is that the scale of the cities are quite different. So the cities I lived in China, right now I'm in Hong Kong. You know, Hong Kong is a very populated area. And that happens in China a lot. We have like 10 or 20 like the same scale cities. So it means that people are connecting to each other more closer than what we have in the United States, right? So in Ann Arbor, the city scale is quite sparse, I will say. And there are not a lot of people interacting with each other quite often. So it means in China, we may have to use more what we call real-time or more responsive kind of management to make people all feel good.
Wow, fascinating. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit with some, because we do have about 2 hours worth of discussion here. So we'll be getting back to that. I think those are really good points and differences. Now, Carla, you've been, last time we met, I think you were still working for Ohio State and working on a smart cities project there. Was that your first experience with smart cities?
It was my first proposal and deployment for a smart city project. I had started doing research on smart cities almost immediately in 2014, 2015, even before I started at Ohio State. I started doing some work because one of the aims of Nissan was, again, to improve people's lives through transit. So we were one of the first ones that launched an electric vehicle. It didn't do very well, but one of the first ones. And then we began looking at mobility services and autonomy and clever ways of managing safety. And that made me start thinking about differences between just how many cars we sell and how much profit we make, which is what most automakers are looking at. But really, again, how a vehicle or transportation system or ride sharing or whatever kind of device can really make a difference for people in their interactions in the world. So that began kind of the journey. But then when I was in the university and was really tasked with bringing together all of the different colleges that were doing anything related to mobility into a big project. So that was everything from exoskeletal work up through drones and including agricultural equipment and all kinds of buses. And there was so much work going on. And even in the public policy side and in the legal side, all of these groups were thinking about transportation, thinking about smart cities, but just bringing them holistically together. This was my first opportunity to do that. And the Columbus Smart City Challenge was a $50 million grant from the Department of Transportation. There were 78 cities that applied. And then from there, 8 cities were selected to be finalists. And then you had to, of course, write more and do more and make a video and then go present to the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. And then from there, Columbus was selected. And the reason that we were selected is because we focused on a very specific part of the community, an underserved part of our community. And everything that we did, all the different elements related to that community and really improving. We also put in that proposal now you might want to think of it as a smart Columbus operating system, where most cities, all of the different departments are striated. They have old legacy systems that don't talk to one another. And it's really hard then to coordinate between social services and utilities and parking and the public transit system. So we created a way that they all could begin to communicate, and then deployed a smart mobility wallet, so to speak, where no matter how you wanted to get around the city, you just needed one app, and you could pay through that app and just make it simple. Because part of our premise was, if we don't make it simple and convenient for people to change behavior, they're not going to change behavior. It has to be an improvement for them.
Very good. Carly, you made bring up, and both of you have brought up the point about bringing groups together to be able to be successful in these types of programs. Xiaotang, can you tell me about some of the work that you've been doing, about how you were able to bring the diverse groups together to actually make things happen?
Well, the first thing came to my mind is actually a project that I did back in Florida when I was still a master's student at the University of Florida. So they're going to deploy a thing called a Road Ranger, which I think Michigan has the same one, to help the vehicles which has accidents quickly recover the traffic accidents on the highway. So at that time, our customers are actually the managers in the Department of Transportation. And our goal is to try to see, okay, we have the mass, we have the model. We're trying to see how many drivers, how many vehicles per road we use, right? To give a quick responsive response, and also to limit the cost. So at that time, we are always listening to what the customers would want. Well, we don't want our folks to lose jobs, so we could not cut the drivers to a very, very low number. We have to keep the certain amount of supply. But in the meanwhile, we try to make a good use of them. It means that we have to respect their own work schedules. We could not assign someone to work always at night. And we also need to respect the traffic conditions, which mean that sometimes at weekdays, the traffic happens a lot at commuting hours, and weekends that the curve is more flat, but there could be some spot events that we need to cover. Mm-hmm. So we actually categorize the traffic conditions into different classes, and we come up with different plans and help people to better understand what they can do at each class. Mm. And especially, we cannot let the managers to develop use of our model. So we develop a VBA based, so it's an Excel form. So they just need to input what they need, their demand, and our small Excel tool will give us how many people you're going to use right now, how many vehicles you're going to use right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fascinating. Now you're really getting into the nitty gritty here. I think that's very good, though. I think that people need to understand the complexity that is tied into this program. Carla, you spoke a little bit about that. Do you want to elaborate a little more about how you brought people together? Here you said you were talking about just bringing people together within the university at Ohio State. And how were you able to get to the folks who were outside the university?
Yeah, that was my first foray into walking the the state capitol and the US government capitol to try to gain support, because clearly we needed support from our legislative bodies. So first I went to the mayor of the city, because the mayor was very progressive. He's still mayor. He's still doing a fabulous job in Columbus, and got his support. That was number one. And that was predominantly most important, because he controlled all the departments in the city that needed to be involved. So getting his support and then some funding from the private sector allowed us to put together the team to then do the proposal. But I mean, that was just the very beginning. So there were a lot of state senators and Congress people that didn't understand anything about smart mobility. In fact, I can't tell you the number of times I went into a legislator's office. They knew I was there to talk about, as they put it, the cars that drive themselves. And I would walk in their office and they would say, I love to drive. I don't care what you're going to talk to me about. I'm not going to change my mind. And I'd say, okay, but just listen. And then I would bring up statistics about fatalities and statistics about quality of life improvement, and looking at mobility scores throughout their state and really where they had problems. And by the end of an hour to 2 hours, sometimes they would keep me there much longer than I had intended, they got it. And you could see the light bulb go off that this is important. It's really important. And at that point, I was just mainly talking about the transportation solutions and how that could then improve all of these other aspects. Mm-hmm. So it took time, one by one, to garner their support. But the most important thing that I did was went to the private sector and went to the largest companies in the area, and got their support and their dollars, because we had to have a significant amount of matching funds to be able to do this project. But they had to understand from a business viewpoint why this was important to them. And they could understand it fairly quickly in terms of being able to have a better labor force, being able to attract more people to live in the area, which is better for their business, being able to attract more businesses to the area, which again is good for their business. So for them, they could understand it very, very quickly. Once the momentum, once that kind of agreement happened, then it just kind of took off. It blossomed. And, I was out talking, I don't know in how many different forums, and got more support. And by the time we actually put in our proposal, which was, again, $50 million, we had $95 million in matching funds. By the time we were awarded the $50 million, we had half a billion dollars committed. Mm-hmm. So it was just getting out, talking, convincing, and getting people believing that this was really the right thing to do. And then, of course, getting their pocketbooks too.
Right. So, Carla, you've been gone from the project for how many years now, and how's it been going?
I understand. I stayed in touch with everyone, and in fact, one of the pillars of receiving this award was that you had to keep it going. It wasn't to be one and done. At the end of 5 years, you just stopped it. You had to continue it, and they're continuing to do even more. They were a little delayed in the deployment of some of the initiatives, a lot of policy and legal issues, as you can imagine, and some technology issues as well. And they had to pivot on a couple of them and change the basic assumptions. But they all were done, and the DOT was happy with that. And then the city itself, as part of winning this, needed to go and talk about how they did it. What were the elements? So they're still going around at various smart city events and talking about what they did and now what they continue to do. The other thing Columbus did was they set up a smart cities program office and hired a chief innovation officer. Somebody has to run this for the city. You cannot just count on people to do it on top of their daily jobs. And that's where I think a lot of cities run into trouble.
Very good. Thank you. Xiaoteng, you said you're in Hong Kong right now, right? And are you working on projects, smart city projects in Hong Kong now?
Not really. So
No.
it's a difference from academia. We are more working on research questions and papers.
Okay. But you're studying how other people are in China are working on these smart city projects, right?
Yes.
And
Yes,
can you
indeed.
describe some of the major projects that you see going on within China today?
So I think this is a quite big topic because China is also a big country and
Yes.
it has a lot of parts. So what I can see is just in the south part of China where I was actually living in right now, the transit actually is our subway systems. We are working hard to make a better efficiency and better safety. So once our department has contacted with the Guangzhou subway system, and they have a set of requirements for us. For example, Guangzhou is the capital city of the Guangdong province,
Right.
and they try to expand their subway system to other cities. So it is not only an intercity thing, it becomes an intercity thing.
Mhm.
The subways could connect it with railways. So all the people, they could use the seamless railway system to go from one city to another without stop. That is their ambitious goal.
Mhm.
But it is indeed a very hard goal because there are different parties running the different groups. So they don't know, well, how can we collaborate with them and which role should we choose? So it is actually a deployment thing. We need to deploy the rails to where that there is a potential people could like to live and where the potential business could happen.
Mhm.
But in the meanwhile, if we don't know whether they have the potential, business won't come. They should see that there is a real, then I have the possibility to attract more people.
Mhm.
And the people are the same. If they see a real and they would like to live nearby, so it will make really a convenience for their lives.
Mhm.
So it is like an egg and chicken thing.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the job for our academia is to say, well, we are not working on the real problems, but we can working on the assumptions and hypotheses. And we can see, well, if that is assumption, what we can do. And if that could not happen, and what is the hurdles, and what if we have to that thing happen, what are the conditions?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're leading with transportation in this
Not really.
scenario, right?
I hope so, but it's far more from that. I'm still a junior, so
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of things to learn.
And I think that, but the projects that you're describing seem to be leading with transportation. That
Yeah.
we're going to do the connection, we're going to connect subways to other cities, and then things will happen. Now, from our research, when we were looking at Shanghai, for example, we could hear about it, and this is true for many parts in China because of the significant amount of money that the government has paid out for infrastructure, and that includes those subways, and it includes highway infrastructure and everything else that and the bullet trains and things like that. China's been amazing in terms of making these connections within the country. So much so that when you think about a major city like Shanghai, where you would have communication hubs that would allow you to live pretty far outside the city and still be able to commute back in. But also, as you were saying, once those transportation hubs are established, even outside the city, cities grow in those areas so that the suburbs become even large cities, and that people may not have to come back to Shanghai to work, they could work in those suburban cities. We've seen some of that stuff, some of that in the U.S., and I think that's probably something that's continuing to happen in China. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. The thing is, actually, the department, the apartment price, and also the house sales are actually very expensive in the city, in the center of city, which is the opposite to most American cities, because Americans like to live in the suburban areas, right? So that is a high price in the center of the city that kind of push people, especially those young people. They are from small cities, they are from small towns, they are trying to seek opportunities in big cities, but they cannot afford a very high living in the center of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they go to the suburban areas.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one thing we should pay attention, that the communication technology.
Right.
And especially we have the COVID cases. So right now we can all work from home for a lot of jobs. I'm not meaning all the jobs, but for a lot of jobs, people can use their home as their workstation, and also use their computers, use the internet to connect with other people to do their jobs.
Right.
And that means they don't need to live in the city. They can live good life in the suburban areas.
Yeah. As we all know, the pandemic has created real huge paradigm shifts in how people work. I don't know how much that is going to change in the future. Was it going to stay? How much at-home work is going to continue? We know that some businesses are bringing people back in the U.S., but not maybe at full every day. But it seemed, I always, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was talking to some managers, and the managers didn't know how to manage when remotely. They had challenges doing remote managing, so they had to do some real adaptations to this. Carla, when you look at this story that Xiaoteng is talking about, again, it's very based on transportation, and I'm sure, and as you said, transportation is part of the story from your perspective. But I wanted to dig down a little more into this idea of how to keep areas that were at one time were inexpensive, but now are accessible, from becoming too expensive and pushing people even farther out. I don't know if that's an issue in China, but it's something that, Carla, you must have you were thinking about, or you've run into.
Yeah, I think we've seen it many, many times where we've had gentrification of a neighborhood that, was slightly run down or something. We see several neighborhoods in the perimeters of Washington, D.C., for example, that the home values there have skyrocketed. And many of the people who have been there for years can barely afford to live there, and many have had to sell out and move further out. And the further out you go, then your dependency on your personal owned mobility device becomes very important. You almost have to own a car. Unfortunately, with today's world, very few people can even afford a car. Just to give you a statistic, the average American today, average income American, can afford a vehicle that is 14 years old. So, that tells you how unaffordable a vehicle has become, even a used vehicle has become. So when we think about that, it's really creating equity issues that I don't think any of us would even thought about even as little as 2 years ago, before the pandemic. And it's not going to change. Therefore, we have to think entirely differently about the mobility ecosystem. And it's not just vehicles, it's scooters, it's e-bikes, it's more bicycles, it's using your feet more, really making bus transit palatable and tenable, putting in high-speed rail. I mean, we have not invested in that in a country. Some cities have pretty good subway systems. Most cities do not. And we're truly a car-based society. And if we really want to become practical, nothing is better than public transit to move large amounts of people over small and long distances. So we have to really think about how we're going to manage that as a society. What we've tended to do over the years is we have made roadways, those roadways get full, so we enlarge them, those get full immediately. So no, it's this vicious circle that we're in. We just keep making more roadways and enlarging them, we just keep filling them up because that's what we do. Right. So we have to think about transit differently and provide this safe and secure mobility ecosystem. And I talk a lot about this, the coexistence of many different forms of transit on a common roadway. During the pandemic, we actually saw some cities, including Ann Arbor, start doing some very smart things, closing off roadways for pedestrian districts and bicycling, putting in lanes for bicycles and for scooters so that they can traverse safely. Now we just have to train our drivers what to look for because we're not used to anything besides cars being on the roadway. But, so we have to think about how we train and how we make people aware of and how we can use communication and technology to help with the safety of a full ecosystem. We need to think differently. And we also need to realize that it's not a one solution for every municipality. Everyone is different. Everyone has different demographics, and those demographics are continually churning if the city is growing, if it's not what we call one of our declining cities. So if it's growing and evolving, you have to evolve with it. So all these, and that's a dichotomy for cities because cities normally think 40, 50 years. And that's too far with technology improving as quickly as it is. So same as we've seen life cycles for vehicles and life cycles for other products get shorter and shorter and shorter, we're going to have to do the same kind of planning in our urban environments and in our suburban environments, exurban environments, and rural environments.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point with the bringing up the rural story, the exurban and rural story. Xiaotang, can you tell me about Xitang? I'm sorry. Can you tell me how how China is managing the rural areas in terms of smart cities?
Well, I would say from my experience and from what I see, the focus is mainly in the big cities. So for the rural cities, it's still the traditional Department of Transportation who are taking care of them. So we've seen a lot of cities trying to build something they call the AI brain. That's because those cities have the data, they have the power to build something to, let's say, a traffic control center. So they can use data to better management their system. But a lot of rural areas, a lot of small towns, they don't have that money. So they just based on quite traditional tools to say, well, I have maybe several lines for my transport system, the public transport. I just run 5 lines, but I'm not quite care about how efficiency it is, how reliable it is. I just know I have that people running those lines. That's the thing I see. But things kind of changing because right now people realize we are living in a regional area. We people can move out of the side of the city. So it's from the province level, it's like similar to the US state level. There, the Department of Transportation are doing some things to provide the intercity connections. And those things could really help people move from their cities to the big cities. And also for the small cities, like Carol said, where people can usually use their foot, right? Use the bicycles, use scooters, and therefore there should be a focus really on the pedestrian lane side. But I should say that because the US and China has different history, and our country is developing as car technology is developing. It means that when the country is still in the developing state, not a lot of people have cars. So at the early stage of planning, there are actually a lot of roads are building for the pedestrians, for the bicycles, and even for the electric scooters, and people can still utilize them today.
Yeah, when you talk about, US and China are about the same size in terms of geography, but when you talk about the differences in the numbers of people, it's, China is like 3 times larger than the US. So when we talk in our rural areas, those rural areas are not really well populated sometimes, whereas rural areas in China are very heavily populated. And, they have, the major cities are much bigger than US cities, than most big US cities. The tier 2 cities are larger than some of our major cities, right? And so it's a different animal that we're really actually trying to manage when you're trying to support 1.2 to 1.3 billion people versus I think we're at what 370 million people, something like that in the US. But when it comes to cars, now China actually has, they crossed over the line, I think sometime last year, where they now have more cars on the road than we have in the United States. Now, when you go cars per household, that's a whole nother story, right? But all this comes together in terms of how you make decisions about smart cities, right? And I wanted to get into the story. Carly, you've already talked about it a little bit, is the mobility as a service story. We've had a few conferences on that. I think you might have even spoken at one of our conferences on that topic. And the interaction of, and you talked about it, the interaction of different technologies and different modes of transportation, and having maybe one app that would allow you to go across different modes of transportation. In China, they're using, I remember we had a speaker from Didi who was speaking about using the WeChat, I think the WeChat app that would allow you to do multiple things on that would give you all the information you need to use multiple resources, to transportation resources. Carla, how do you see that playing out in the US right now?
Yeah, there's a few places that have adopted it. There's a few independent apps that have tried it in a few cities. And those that have, it actually is working pretty well. They've included everything from bicycles to taxis to Uber to buses to subway. And you just put in, you want to go A to B, and you get a menu, similar to when you book an airplane, right? And, you can choose the fastest, the cheapest, the healthiest, or whatever way you want to get from A to B. But the most important part of that is being able to pay for it once.
Yeah.
So one of the most disconcerting things is you take a bus from your home to the outskirts of the city. You have to change that bus and get on another bus, but the next bus is not related to that bus. So you have to pay that one separately, and it has a totally different app with a totally different time schedule. And it's up to you to coordinate all of this.
Yeah.
And it's a pain in the neck, quite frankly. Yeah. And this goes back to all these different systems that don't communicate, because they have these legacy systems that the idea of coordinating them is worse than the idea of creating a totally new system. Yeah. So to be able to do this and then have the luxury of just paying it all from one particular source. The other thing we have to think about is not all people are banked and not all people have credit cards.
Right. Right.
So you have to be able to also just use good old dollars, or I don't know about cryptocurrency these days.
No, let's not go there, Carla.
I don't even want to talk about that, but I'm sure it's coming in some way. But you know, in to be able to take all these different sources, but still allow that convenience, that is predicated, of course, on the fact that you have one of these. You can't see it, a cell phone. You know, a cell phone or some sort of device that allows you to do this. And a lot of people have a phone, but they don't have Wi-Fi, or they don't have a data plan that allows them beyond, you know, maybe the 10th day of the month to be able to have that kind of service. So we have to even drill down into something even more basic, and that is, do you have Wi-Fi or not? And if not, then what kind of service do we have to provide so that you can be included in this all-in-one mobility wallet? So it's many different issues. So you may need, just like we had to do in the underserved area in Columbus, after we talked to the residents, it was like, well, most of them don't have Wi-Fi. Most of them get their news at the community center, the church, the school, or by a flyer in their front door. So you have to completely change the way you were thinking. So we suddenly said, well, we need Wi-Fi hotspots. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
For folks whose cellular plans just don't have enough data. They can't afford it. So you have to look at all these aspects. So a mobility wallet is great, but does it take all methods of payment? Do people in that community have Wi-Fi to be able to access it?
Right.
Which is a big problem, not only in the underserved communities in urban areas, but in the rural areas as well. We know that many of those areas still are without Wi-Fi, or with satellite Wi-Fi that is not good.
Yeah. Xiaotang, we know that China has been more advanced in some ways with technology. Everybody has a smartphone. It may not be as an expensive one, but it may be available, and that especially within cities, the accessibility of Wi-Fi and the ubiquitousness of the cell phone, and the capability of that people use it to pay for almost everything now. And I think that China is farther ahead of the U.S. in terms of this. But does China have some of those same problems that Carla was talking about, where not everybody has a phone, not everybody has a banking system that allows them to do it by the phone, or is it pretty much ubiquitous throughout the country?
Yeah, I think there is an issue, especially for the elderly. So I think it's a news from last year, when an old man trying to get on a bus because he don't have the smartphone, so he didn't have the what we call the healthy code. So it shows you that you don't have COVID, so you can get on a bus safely. So he didn't have that. So the bus driver refused to let him in, and it becomes a social news in the internet, and people are talking about that. So it means that, yes, as Carla said, we couldn't have just one single solution for all the people, because people, they are different. We have to incorporate those people who are elderly, who cannot speak for themselves, especially in the internet. We are young people, we can speak for ourselves what we have been treated today, but those elderly, they cannot. I actually don't know how the government are dealing with that. I'm believing that they are dealing with that, but whether there's still a long way to go, I believe it is yes.
Is it true? And I think that's a very good point about the elderly, and as Carla was talking about, the people who don't have a lot of money, so they can't afford all these things. Does it include in China the people who are poor, as well as the people, as well as the elderly? Are they struggling with this as well?
I think it's like most for age is not for the poor or rich. It's because, as you said, a lot of young people, they have smartphones. Either it's a good smartphone or it's just with some basic functions. But as long as you have a smartphone, you can connect with the outside world.
Right.
But it's for the elderly. A lot of elderly, they refuse to go out in these days because they are facing like it feels like they are refused by the whole society. And it actually happens to me because I think when I was still doing my study at the University of Michigan, and once I came back to China, I don't have the bank credit card, a Chinese bank credit card, and they refused me to use Didi.
Ah.
And I have to take a taxi, but the taxi driver, because it's like the old tradition, you call the taxi on the street, and he actually don't know where you should go, and he's actually pissed off when I said that the distance is very close, and he just earned 60 yuan. It's like $10. And he wait at the airport for 2 hours, and he sent me using 1 hour. So 3 hours, he just earned 60 yuan, and he's very happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you. We've talked about the capability of being able to move around, the mobility as a service paradigm. Let's talk a little bit about the environment. Carla, when you're working on smart cities, how does environment play out?
There were two aspects of environment that, actually three, that we focused on. One was truly air quality. So there was a big component for electrification and charging stations. And a commitment for us to triple the sales of electric vehicles within 3 years. And a lot of that was managed through the private businesses that I was talking about. But and when I say triple, that meant getting it up to like 2.6%. It's very, very small. Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a super high hurdle, but going from almost nothing. And, you know, we had to hold all kinds of customer user clinics so that people could understand what is an EV. We let them take them for a weekend to see how they fit in their lives and things like that. So the air quality environment was really important. Second was looking at working with the Children's Hospital. The leading cause of death for children 14 and under is automobile accidents. I think most people don't know that statistic. But so we began to work with them because if we could indeed make our roadways safer by making them smarter, by improving accidents, by improving traffic jams, by improving what happens in unsafe roadway conditions, we could improve outcomes for people and hopefully avoid this situation of not only deaths, but other disabilities caused by traffic accidents, because that is a huge burden on our health systems. And the other outcome was, if we could get people employed, if we could get them to educational institutions, if we could get them to healthcare, that would avoid a common situation, which I didn't know about till I started working with the hospitals. Many people who can't afford to get mobility to go to the drugstore to refill a prescription call an ambulance. And the ambulance takes them to the hospital, and that's how they get their medication. They wait until they're so bad that that's how they manage it, and then they can get a ride back too, also covered. So it's a shame, but this is a fact, and it's all because of mobility. So we looked at that. We looked at absenteeism. We looked at educational outcomes, and all of these have a cost to a community. So we look at justifying what you're going to spend on transportation solutions. You really have to look at all of these other costs, because those are societal costs and those are environmental and social costs. So we looked at all of those elements as a means to improve not just climate, but the social climate of the city.
Very good. Xiaoteng, we understand because of the of our studies about China is there's a big focus on congestion and a big focus on pollution. And one could argue that the big focus on new energy vehicles is because of pollution, as one, especially in the major cities. We know that the cities use alternate days depending on your license plate number. And these are, again, the major cities, right? These are tier 1 cities, right? That where you can only come into the city if you have an even or odd number on your license plate, and the NEV license plates allow you to go in and out every day. So this is one strategy that the government is using to kind of improve environment within the cities. Are there other things that they're doing that is helping with the environment?
I think first we can see still from the electric vehicle perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, there are a lot of strategies to motivate the sales of electric vehicles and the use of electric vehicles. But I would say the most effective strategy is still the cost. When people see there is a cost difference between the regular plate with the green plate, which is only for the electric vehicles, they will buy the electric vehicles. And especially at these days, we see a surge in the gas price, and people then tend to buy electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. And for the use of electric vehicles, because not a lot of people can afford a private parking spot, so they don't have the private chargers. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the cities, from the city level and also from the country level, there are a lot of public charging stations building around the country. But we're still facing a issue is that how we're going to better utilize them, because at sometimes there is queues outside of the charging stations, especially when there's big sports event and other things happen. Mm-hmm. And there are all other times if that charger is deployed near a parking spot, there are some gasoline vehicles will stay at the parking spot. So the people with the electric vehicles cannot use it. So I'm still facing these type of problems. And that is from our transportation sector. But some of my colleagues from physics, from material engineering, they argue, well, electric vehicles is not that green if you consider its life cycle, especially in China, how the power is generated. A lot of the power generated from coal. And when we generate power from the coal, it is still not that clean. Mm-hmm. So they argue we should have better materials. We go to hydrogen. We use more sustainable battery. We're getting rid of the electric batteries, and that is their strategy. And also, I would like to say something is from the government perspective, we have the goal, the carbon neutralization goal. They say that by 2016, we're going to decrease the carbon something like by some percent. I could not remember the number quite clearly. But the thing is that under this goal, because China is a centralized system, when government said that we have the goal, all the departments will try very hard to find their own strategies.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and we've talked a little bit earlier in our conversation about some of the human side of managing smart cities, bringing groups together and how you bring groups together. Some of the challenges are, we started into the technology story with the mobility as a service, and we're transitioning now to let's talk a little bit about electric vehicles and automated vehicles and how they might fit in with this. Carla, I just saw a headline, I think from you just today or yesterday about the EV story and fuel prices. And it used to be one of the stories, they would say, just raise fuel prices and everybody will buy an EV because prices will be so expensive. We're having a little problem with that right now, aren't we?
Well, there aren't any vehicles to buy, which really contribute a little bit to that. But up until 2020, fuel price and electric vehicle sales correlated very linearly.
Yeah.
So it was always a good relationship. Since 2020, there's been a divergence where EVs are increasing and fuel price stayed until recently relatively flat or decreasing.
Right.
So we have started to see, more people purchasing electric vehicles since 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Partly, as a side effect, quite frankly, of COVID, where people realized I'm not going to drive this much and probably not ever again. When we really reduced our road traffic and really reduced our air traffic, gee whiz, our skies got really a lot clearer, and that's kind of nice. And so people became, more open to it. Now, when I say that, almost exclusively that increase was from Tesla. And those particular owners have super high incomes. And as we know, during COVID, people with high incomes still working from home didn't get the financial hit that many others in our economy did, whose workplaces were closed, et cetera. So now as we go forward into further electrification strategies and the automakers making serious commitments in terms of dollars and portfolios into electrification, now we need to get cost parity. We need really to get incentives in the game. We don't have any incentives. And as we know, the Build Back Better bill was killed. So, there are chances for appropriations now to come through to be able to bring back incentives. We know incentives work. Then to get the price parity for the average American is important. There were many other elements of Build Back Better, such as no imports after 2025. You got extra discounts if it was made in a union manufacturing shop. I don't anticipate the union issue or the import issue coming back. I might be surprised, but I don't anticipate it. I do see monies being put into circulation to be able to move manufacturing here to strengthen supply chains. But with all the investment from the private sector, from the OEMs, and from many of the tiers and many companies, it will propel the price down. It will improve the efficiencies. We get the charging network in, and people will begin to transition. The question is how fast. And with fuel price, this is the interesting part of what you may have read today. Normally in the US, when fuel price gets to be around $5.50, people say, I don't need those big SUVs and trucks anymore. I need something smaller. But we're not at that level yet. In fact, we've leveled around $4.25, and now it's even decreased a little bit. We'll see what happens as the Russia conflict continues. But when we see fuel prices start to go high, people then say, maybe I don't want to buy those trucks and SUVs. If they do that, and those are the profit makers for the autos, they're using those profits to invest in electrification and autonomy. So should people's buying behaviors change, that may mean we'll see some slowdown in the electrification ramp up in terms of investments.
Yeah.
And that's going to create another problem.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a challenging and interesting time. It's good to be a researcher rather than someone who's actually having to make those company decisions, isn't it?
For sure. I'm on the better side now.
Now, Jiao-Tung, some of the research that's been done, you mentioned it about the use of coal for energy. And in the U.S., there has been research done. I think it comes out of our Argonne National Labs, where they look at what states are using more coal than others. And in the U.S., it's a variety of things. And we also, in one of our conferences, had a researcher from Argonne who went to China, who works with the EPA of China, and they did their analysis there. And it was very similar to the results that we got in the United States, where it turned out that the northern provinces, and in our case, the northern states, were using more coal, and the southern states and the west, I don't know about western states and the western provinces, but definitely the southern provinces were using less coal. and that because of that, you didn't need the, you actually, they did the analysis that showed that it was better to have a fuel efficient gas vehicle in the northern areas rather than an EV, because of the amount of coal that's used to generate. Now we're looking at, when you look at the smart city story, you're really looking at energy as well, right? You're really looking at how that energy is generated. Now, it's probably not generated within the city itself, but it's part of the story. So we're looking at how is energy going to be generated in the future, what it's going on now, what's going to happen in the future. Do you see changes going on in China now in terms of how energy is generated?
Definitely. But actually, I'm not an expert to speak this part. But I can tell from my own story, because my parents working for a firm that is produce the gas, the petroleum. So the standard for production is become more stricter because people want more clean energies. So that is the only thing I could tell. But for the whole energy market, I wouldn't say I can see from the production perspective. I could only see that from the transportation perspective, we are towards that direction. But still, as you said, there is a diversity. There are northern state difference, there are southern state difference. And there's still the different type of vehicles difference, because one of my research focused on trucks. Okay. So for a lot of trucks, actually, we don't have electric trucks right now to afford the long distance logistics. For the city level, we are good. We now have autonomous delivery cars. We have a lot of electric vehicle delivery cars, the vans. But for long distance, for the heavy duty vehicles, we are still rely a lot on the gasolines. So that is the issue that, okay, electric vehicles may help, but how it helps may be little. That's why we, at the same time, we're investigating over the autonomous vehicle technology, hoping better control, as well as vehicle platooning can help us reduce the aerodynamic drags, as well as the fuel.
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge. Of course, when you said gasoline for the trucks, you're really also talking about diesel fuel, right. Which is even probably worse than unleaded gasoline, right? Yeah. So when we look at how that transformation is taking place, even though in the U.S. they're making big noises about electric trucks. I know that electric buses are pretty common in China, and they're becoming more common in the U.S. We started out with hybrid buses, but I think the movement now is towards electric buses, and many of them are coming from BYD. BYD is probably the biggest exporter of vehicles in China, if you count buses, because they really are selling electric buses throughout the world. They have figured out the technology and probably the price point, and China has an advantage there because they have the resources of the lithium, but also have the processing resources. So there's some good things that are happening there. Carla, when you look at how EVs are going to be playing out, again, let's try to keep this within the smart cities perspective. How do you see that playing out from that angle?
Well, I'm a firm believer in right size, right propulse technology, and so one size fits all isn't necessarily the best. But when we think about a city environment, there are two big areas where electric vehicles really work well, and one is in the public transit domain. And it's not just the full-size buses, because if you use proper data analytics, you don't always need a full-size bus. You should have mini buses. You should have almost vans some hours of the day, because you don't want to be taking a big bus, electric, whatever, that's got 3 passengers in it. So you really need to do a better job with data, route management, and then right sizing with knowing that you have another backup if you get a swell of people for some reason. But
Right.
with data analytics and proper data analytics, you can do that. But also within the city, there's a number of service vehicles, garbage trucks, maintenance vehicles that typically stay within the city limits. A lot of start-stop, are able to regenerate power, which are great places as well. Ambulances, this kind of thing, where you have pretty much of a contained route and you have your own facility to be able to charge them. You don't need to worry about public charging. The other area is school buses. School buses are a great deployment for electric technology. When you think about their short distances, stop, start, sit all night, and go all day. There's 2 other areas, and that's in the commercial delivery segment, especially those last hub kind of deliveries, be it 3 to 5 miles, Amazon routes, UPS, FedEx. Those are great opportunities as well. Short distances, a lot of stop and start, not high speed, perfect for EVs. And then the other solution is for mobility as a service providers. You get your Uber, your Lyfts, ride cells, many different areas where, again, an EV is a perfect solution for those kinds of ride sharing, short distances, stop, start, and it can charge overnight or during their downtime. Where I don't see the business equation yet is in the big trucks, the big delivery trucks, because those drayage companies have very little profit margins. Any downtime is just dollars flowing out of their company. So to actually be able to stop and charge those products 8 hours or however long it takes, because the battery packs are massive, I don't know how that pencils. So I think it's going to be a while till we see that, and really fuel cell technology might be a lot smarter.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's something that we've been seeing as well. That we've done a lot of work on heavy trucks as well, and and your point is exactly right about the cost of where the profit comes from. They have such narrow profit margins, and anything that hurts them, and Xiaotang, I see you're shaking your head yes as well, that anything that takes away from any kind of cost for them is going to be, unless it's subsidized, they're not going to deal with it. One of the good things that we've seen in heavy trucks from the large companies, the big larger companies, is that they turn over their vehicles almost every 3 years, and those vehicles go down into the food chain of used vehicles, right? So if you're a company, if they can make the initial cost of, for example, a really large battery component, all the batteries just add more weight to the vehicle, and they have weight restrictions already on the roads. I agree with you. I'm struggling with this, but there's some good news in amongst this, right? Where if they turn over the vehicles often, that means they could, and if the price works out for them, they can actually move the technology into their fleets, and then those vehicles get passed down into the other fleets very quickly. And so there's some potential there if they can get the prices right. Xiaotang, is that what you're seeing in China as well?
So actually, I think in China there are a lot of companies. So the freight market is quite a competitive market, but in the city level, so there are some big, let's say, e-commercials. They are doing some good things to use the electric vehicle as well as the driverless electric vehicles to deliver their goods. They are trying towards that direction. It means that in the meanwhile of cutting down the fuel prices, fuel costs, they are also cutting down the labors. And they're making more distribution centers, and inside the distribution centers, they have the robots. So it's all automatic. They're cutting down in the loud and make it more fast. That's how the big immersions, e-commerces they are doing in the cities.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that from our research on China, we've seen that the central government has been really pushing the provinces to do all the things that Carla was talking about. The school buses, the ambulances, the garbage trucks, everything that is governmentally run, they want to transition to EVs. Again, they can do that because it's not a long haul. It's not a long distance. These are usually done within the city. Carla, do you see any of that happening in the US, in that helping with that transition?
It's being done on a state by state level, although in the infrastructure bill, we did see $7.5 billion for buses and for ferries.
Yeah, that's right.
7.5
I think it's school buses. I think it's school buses, isn't it?
Mainly school buses, yes, and ferries, and then 7.5 billion for charging infrastructure, which then is left up to each state, to put together a proposal and get their allocation.
Right.
Some of the states themselves are starting to support. California is one that has offered incentives for school buses. If California does it, then some other green states are likely to follow. But it depends each state right now. The federal government, 7.5 billion is kind of peanuts for what's probably needed.
Right.
So it's that common practice at the federal level that I think is the big divider between how we're doing things and how China's doing things. And that makes it really difficult because, as we talked about in the beginning, each city has different needs. Each state has different needs. Each Department of Transportation has different funding. Texas gets the most amount of money of any of the 50 states. They can do so many things on their roadways. You've got other states, like Iowa, for example, that's not the case. So they're very limited what they can do. And the only way to make equity is for the federal government to allocate fairly. And I think I think the federal government also needs to make clear their policy for any government vehicles, starting with federal government and then state government. Because again, there's a ton of them. And if they all go electric, people will again see, gee, electric vehicles are real. Look, they're all over our city now. They're managing all kinds of things. I guess maybe I should think more seriously about them. It's a snowball effect.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue. And I think that's where I think China has an advantage in that respect, because they have been pushing that. The central government has been pushing that out to the provinces, and the leaders of the provinces are part of the central government, and they're not being elected, so that they end up being there. They know where their marching orders are. And if they do not respond, the central government will put someone else in there who will respond. Right?
It's much different than our rogue and renegade way of doing government.
It is. And I think it slows us down in some cases. But like you said, in some cases, states would argue, I don't know if we need this, or the system that you're trying to push out is not something that we're so rural, we don't have that advantage. We don't need that, right?
I have an interesting story, if you'll allow me just for a moment. I had an interview this week with a radio station in Nebraska. And their main question was, will the farmers in Nebraska buy electric vehicles? So it was a great question, and one I hadn't thought about, but fundamentally, if they're just using it on their ranch and they have a charging station at their farm, why not?
Right.
But if they're using it to tow horses across the state, maybe not. So,
right.
But it was really interesting how these different segments of the population are starting to think about, will an electric vehicle work for our particular state or municipality? So it's a different conversation than it was even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's being driven by the 50% by 2030 initiative.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the charging thing that, you know, we really think about where we are in terms of electric vehicles, we're in very early days. And even though there's been some massive major improvements in batteries, I just have this feeling that, you know, 10 to 15 years from now, the batteries are going to look very different. Whether they will be in vehicles and, you know, how well the manufacturers can adapt and make changes to, you know, adding new types of technology. We had one person from Ford talk to us and said, once they make a decision to go with a certain lithium ion battery in their plants, it's going to be challenging to say, oh, now we're going to go with a different lithium ion battery. Well, maybe if it's the same size, it might be able to fit in, but you know, there's big challenges in terms of manufacturing when you go at the scale that they work at, right?
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about AVs, autonomous vehicles. Shitong, how have you been seeing AVs working in China and within the context of smart cities?
I saw a huge momentum. So a lot of startup companies doing their own autonomous vehicle technology.
Yeah.
And we are targeting at different markets.
Mm-hmm.
Some are specifically at what they call robot taxi. So
Mm-hmm.
it's in the specific areas we can use autonomous vehicles as taxis.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also, as we said earlier, there are also for the driverless deliveries,
Mm-hmm.
driverless car, driverless deliveries.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also some people targeting specifically at trucks, at containers, at the piers, and at this. Those areas are highly specified. So their operational environment is highly simplified. It means that we don't need to face a lot of unexpected events so that the vehicles can follow its program to run. So I think that's where the autonomous vehicles can help us, because as we all know, we're not ready to go to the level 5. So but we still want to take the benefits of those autonomous vehicles. Then we're just going to use them step by step as small specific areas for some specific operations.
Yeah, yeah. Carla, how do you see that playing out within the smart city context?
Yeah, I think it's very much aligned. When you think about the first usages for AVs, everyone always said robo-taxis. We're going to have robo-taxis, and we're going to have them first on dedicated areas of our cities, and then we'll have them in mixed traffic. Now, I think a lot of people are saying, I don't know about that mixed traffic. That's really going to be difficult. But putting them in for delivery services, for goods delivery, this includes drones, every kind of, we'll call it mobility device, depending on where you are. That makes a lot of sense. In the commercial side right now, we can't get enough delivery people. We can't get enough truck drivers. It's a big problem. So we really need to tackle this manpower plus safety issue. Mm-hmm. Taking goods is, relatively safe, low speed kind of deliveries. We've seen it with pizza delivery. We've seen it with grocery delivery, and the grocery delivery is starting to expand through services like Neuro and other companies that are involved in this kind of product. And then we're starting to see great strides being made in the semi-truck side of the business, with first platooning and then potentially autonomy. Mm-hmm. Again, we just don't have enough truck drivers, and the demand for people to get goods delivered directly to their home has increased exponentially. That's not going down. Mm-hmm. We've seen coming out of the pandemic, people are not changing their behavior. They got really used to this delivery service. Mm-hmm. So it is a great way to enable delivery safely utilizing autonomy for goods. And I think we have to really look at which roadways are best suited for it. We're starting in the southwest of the US along US 10. There's a corridor that's been developed there. There's a Texas corridor as well where this work is being done. There was a corridor planned along the Ohio Turnpike. Eventually that one should start. Some work being done or was being done before the truckers convoy in DC. But really looking at where we have these bottlenecks in terms of supply chain and human capital. And I think if we continue to use robotics and automation in this way, where we have a problem because of human capital, we're using technology to solve that problem, and it's inanimate kinds of things, I think this is a much better idea. I think we also saw Hyperloop recently pivot and say, we're not going to be taking any passengers. We're only going to do goods.
Oh, really?
I don't know why they said that. I'm guessing their testing didn't turn out as well as they thought in the vacuum tubes. But again, goods can withstand a vacuum tube with zero oxygen. Human people cannot. So, I think people are beginning to think, yeah, let's start there. Let's perfect it there, and then let's expand it into the people scenario. I do believe we'll start to see a lot more autonomous zones where just autonomous vehicles in very congested areas and cities, those where there's multi-unit dwellings, where there's no way you can have, especially in some of the skyscrapers in China, there's no way you can have a charging station for all who live there, but you could have a mobility platform in the first floor and be able to be quite efficient with that. So looking at it from that perspective, thinking about how we can design our buildings differently to enable these kinds of mobility as a service and delivery services, and how we need to change our roadways to enable that as well.
Yeah. One of the last topics we want to talk a little bit about before we get into the Q&A session has to do with cybersecurity. Do you see this cybersecurity playing an important role within the smart cities paradigm? Xiaoteng, can you talk a little bit about that?
I do believe. Well, whenever we are talking about data, we are talking about those data coming from people's behaviors, right? And there comes from the privacy issue. And when we are talking about cybersecurity, we try to proactively defend those potential attacks, right? And we are also trying to see, well, if there is actually an attack, how are we going to deal with that? So it all comes to the sense that we need better management. We may need more have more civilians, but then it comes to the question, well, I feel like my privacy is kind of exploded. So exposed. So I don't want that. So it's also always a trade-off, whether we want to better safety, security, and then we want to have more privacy. And this is still, so from the research perspective, this is still a hot topic. People are trying different models to see how they're going to defend if there is attack to, for example, our traffic lights. If the traffic light has been messed up, all the vehicles, all the traffic flows will be messed up. How are we going to deal with that? And there is also from the vehicle, the one vehicle perspective, how are we going to see that in a stream of vehicles, if one vehicle has some like different behaviors, they're like a drunk driver driving, how are we going to disappear how are we going to mitigate the disturbance that is caused by this drunk driver? So there are a lot of interesting studies. People use different methods to deal with that, but still, I think it is an open area, and we need to put more effort into it.
Carla, how do you see cybersecurity playing out within the smart cities context?
It's a big deal. Cyber and data privacy and data ownership is a big deal. This is one of the biggest contention points between a city and the different technology companies that want to deploy certain data systems within the city. The city wants to own the data. They say it's ours. We should be able to monetize it. And the company that's putting in all the infrastructure says, no, we should share it. You know, we want to monetize that data too. It's valuable. So, but more importantly, it's how do you keep it safe? Who's responsible for the data? Who's going to make the code and you know, make sure that all the communications coming in are valid, that they have the right certification on them. And this gets us in a very tricky area today, and we haven't really figured that out. What we do know is cybersecurity or cyber attacks are going to keep happening and probably become more frequent. And the best we can do is be prepared to catch them quickly and manage them. From a smart city perspective and from the citizens' perspective, citizens are most hesitant to allow their data to be shared with government. They will easily click the box on an app for their phone, but if the government wants their data, they become very reluctant, which is very interesting, but true. So the way we approached it in the city, in the speaking points for the city was there has to be value for the citizen for them to share their data. If I share my data, then I get this benefit, and it's going to be maybe better sidewalk quality. Maybe my roads will be fixed. I won't have all the potholes. Maybe my garbage will be picked up on time and they won't forget my recycling. You know, some give and take. I'm going to share this data with you, but darn it all, I better get something in return. And this is the way the city has to think about it, which is quite a bit different than what, you know, the app providers or others have to think about.
Xiaoteng, you've been shaking your head yes on many of these things. Did you have anything you wanted to add in this story?
I just quite agree with what Carol said. We are like when we want to incentivize people to share their data, we have to let them know, right? When the government have your data, is not to do something evil on you. It's actually to make a better living for you. As long as they have that realization, as long as they see the real benefits, they would like to share the data. Why we share the data with the phone apps? Because we're using the phone apps. If we don't share the data with the phone apps, we cannot use some of the functions. So it's actually quite coincide with the theory I'm working on. And I saw that how the theory come to the reality. So that's quite fascinating.
Now, Carla, I want to circle back on your project with your experience with Ohio State and Columbus. What were the most common ways for government, academia, and industry to collaborate for smart cities?
I would say there were 2 or 3. One of the real interesting ones was when we decided to put in bus rapid transit, and that required the civil engineering teams to be involved because it was basically dedicating a lane for this bus rapid transit. It required the engineering team to be not civil, but kind of electrical or transit engineering to be involved to determine what kinds of equipment was required, both on the traffic signal side and in the vehicle side. It required the public policy people to be involved because it actually was going to intermingle with regular traffic, and there were particular laws along each part of the roadway that had to be dealt with. The roadway wasn't always owned by the same person for the whole length. That's the other interesting thing in our country is the roadway, parts of it is city owned, parts of it is handled by the state, parts of it could be private. It's really quite interesting. And of course, the lawyers had to be involved too, because it was a new system and you had to think about, you know, anything legal that may happen. So that was one area. The other area was the one I was talking about earlier, was this economic impact to the community once you began to have mobility solutions and be able to improve the quality of life there with the Wi-Fi hotspots. And we saw the prices, the home prices starting to rise. Then we had to think differently about what we should do to enable people to still be able to stay there. So we had to make sure that, yes, we put in these systems. Are they using those systems? How can we incentivize them to use those systems, to go out and get better jobs, go on and get educated? So it became a social kind of study at that point in human behavior. The human behavior people were deeply involved in almost every aspect, because this was impacting people and changing the way they do things. And those changes never come easy.
Mm-hmm.
So in many cases, you had to bring in people you didn't even think you really needed to bring in, which was quite interesting. We also had to look at, we had to work with the School of Rehab to make sure that we were inclusive to people with disabilities, be they physical or cognitive. Was our app easy to use for those who might have a different way of thinking? So it was really quite compelling, the different expertise that we needed to make these things work out. And academia had to provide the research to then work with the city folks who had to deploy. The city folks had to talk to the Department of Public Works and Public Safety to see what their concerns were and then bring those back, and we had to get the research. So this is kind of, when I said earlier, some of these were delayed. This is why it took much longer than we thought to go through every single element that needed to happen.
Xiaotang, did you see that going on in China as well, in terms of the, and you could even speak about some of the research that you did in Florida, where you had to bring in academia, government, and industry to work together?
Yeah, I think it's quite a Americanized style, because before we actually deploy something, there are a lot of discussions to make sure every stakeholder is on the same page. And that's why back in Florida, we kind of discuss a lot with the industry, because the private sectors is kind of a connection for us academia to the public sector, because some of our language are not the same. We try to see some language is more mathematical because we try to make it a meaningful research questions, but not all the research questions will turn out to be some product that people can directly use. So the private sector actually is helping us a lot to bring what the government really needs. And that helps us to package, okay, what is the essence of their needs? And then the private sector also helps us to see, okay, this is your solution, but this solution is not the solution that the government can understand. So you should put it into another language. So that really helps us a lot.
That's fascinating. Did you see that? Did you see that playing out in China as well?
I just come back last year, so I don't have a lot of the experience working with government. But one thing I have seen that in China, everything comes so quick. They always want a product. So it means that the discussion session is somehow short. It means that once we have some product, all the people can see, then we're going to adjust it to make it better shape. That is the difference.
Yeah. And I think that applies to many regulations in China, where if something's not working, the government will say, this is not working. We're going to make a change. I think they did it with NEVs when they were started in terms of they were going to give subsidies to certain vehicles if they had enough power, if they have enough range. And then they said, no, this is not getting us where we wanted to go. You need to get more range if you want the subsidies. Because in China there's probably 200 automotive companies, and they're all trying to survive and doing small batches of things, trying to get subsidies so that they can continue on. it's something that we noticed over, I think we started studying NEVs in China in probably like 2015, 2016. So we've been kind of following it for a long time, and the government is just making changes. And if they see something's not working, they're just going to make a change. Now, recently, I saw some articles that made it sound like, well, if the government's going to make all these changes, then people feel that it's kind of, they're not certain whether it's going to stick. And they start being second guessing the government about it. I don't know if I want to do this. They might change it tomorrow, you know, and then I will lose out, you know, something like that. So anyhow, this whole story about the interaction of government and academia and industry, I really like the story about using certain language to be able to try to get the groups to understand what you're trying to say. And Carla, did you have to go through that as well?
Well, I think it's because everybody has a different viewpoint and a different outcome that they desire.
Yeah.
So for us, it was more creating that common goal. So similar, I guess, creating that common language. That regardless which outcome or which side of that discussion you were on, the common goal was there. So, you know, for business, is this going to help my business? Is it going to make my business grow? For government, is this going to help people that they'll like me more and I'll get reelected? You know, to give me a platform. And for academia, will I have good research that I can publish? And you had to make sure when you were looking at this common goal, could all of those different objectives be achieved? And, you know, with the total outcome being the citizens' lives get better.
Right.
Because we don't want to just do technology for technology's sake. We don't want to just put programs in to get reelected. And we just don't want to make businesses more profitable without any other good things happening. So you have to find that balance.
Yeah, very good. One of the questions that the Michigan China Forum put together for this particular session had to do with students. And one of the questions was, what would be your recommendations for students who would like to devote themselves to smart cities, either from an industry, academic, or a public sector perspective? Xiaotang, can you start with that?
Well, I think for students, either you're undergraduate students or graduate student, learn as much as you can, not only from your classes, your textbooks, but also from your daily lives, because smart city is about everyone's living, right? So everything you see, you saw, you hear in daily life could be some inspiration. That would be my suggestion. Just to put your heart to live.
Yeah. Are there any preparations they can make in advance to better equip themselves with a solid foundation in this area?
I believe the knowledge is important. So, but smart city involves a lot of things. As Carla just said about her project, right? We have people from engineering, and we have people from humanity. We have people from sociology. Sorry, I forgot how to read the word, but from the economics and from those social sciences, right?
Social sciences,
right. And we also have people that maybe they're from math, from physics, they're more from fundamental sciences. But no matter what, you need to have your expertise, develop your expertise, and then you can use your knowledge to better help of the whole project. And in the meantime, find your opportunities. If you're a graduate student, you must find your direction. Try to find some research projects you can do at school. Whenever you're undergraduate or graduate students, try to find internship opportunities outside the school. That will be my suggestion.
Very good. Carla?
Yeah, I agree with her points so strongly. try to find a place to study too that has professors that have expertise in smart cities in some way, be it human behavior sociology, the College of Architecture, urban planning. All of these things contribute in some ways to smart cities. And then get involved with a capstone or some other project on campus that lets you work with industry and in some cases also with government on some of these projects. And interestingly enough, at Columbus, at Ohio State, a lot of the students that worked with me in this original proposal, they started their own Student Smart Columbus group. It was a special club that they started themselves, and they actually began to work with mobility issues in a senior citizens complex not far from campus. Start something synergistically with others that are interested and do something in the community. I think this really gives you that practical experience.
Xiaoteng, were you using students in your Florida project? You were a student at that time, maybe, right?
Yeah, right. So I was the only student. Yes, I was the only student who was involved in that project. And one thing I just came to my mind is there is a tournament called Transportation Technology Tournament, which is held by the USDOT, the National Center of Excellence. And the goal is to bring the academia, especially the students who are interested in transportation engineering, and the local DOT, as well as the metropolitan office together. So the government perspective, they will provide some questions. And then it asks the students team to come up with questions. I've experienced, I've been in this tournament for twice, 2019 and 2020. So the projects we've been working on is, so the first thing is how to mitigate the traffic congestion at 975 and 96, I believe the in the interchange, which we know is very congested, right? And another project is for the city of Ann Arbor, how we better utilize the curbside spaces in the downtown area, not only for parking, but also for scooters, for deliveries, for other types of mobility. So all these things, we have the opportunity to talk with people from government, and we know what their needs are, and the students are quite smart to come up with excellent ideas.
Yeah, I was thinking of a project that was started at the U of M. I think it's probably 5 years ago now, and I think it's still going on. The researcher who worked on it, he moved to Georgia Tech, but the project was similar to the one that, to a point that you made, Carla, about in Ann Arbor, you don't need to have big buses going everywhere, and that they had these small buses that would take you to do the last mile, right? All the last mile trips, so that you could actually move around the city, and that they could optimize how they were using the transportation systems. I think that project might still be going on. I think it was Professor Van Hendrick. I think that was his name.
Yeah, Pascal. He used to be with industrial engineering.
Yeah. He presented at one of our conferences. It was fascinating to see how that project was playing out, and it really is a smart city issue, right? Where you're doing that first and last mile story, and also and how to optimize the resources that you have, so that you can have maybe smaller vehicles not using as much gasoline, and still being able to service people, and to allow them to get to places, so they don't, that if you're going to carry groceries, you can actually get to back and forth from a grocery store without having to walk miles, right? That's one of the things that I thought was that I noticed at the U of M. I wanted to also open up the Q&A to any of the people who are online right now. I've got a couple questions that I want to reach out to you guys about. This can go to either to Xiaotang or to Carla. Is matching funds the only source of funds from the government, or are there other sources of financial support from the government? I think this is more of a Carla question.
Yeah. For the Columbus Smart City Challenge, the federal government allocated 50 million. And most of the grants that come from the US government have some kind of match, anywhere from 20% to 50%. That can be real dollars or it can be in kind. So when I was talking about the 95 million and then the $500 million, that was some of that was matching funds. For example, someone put in funding to put in a smart roadway as part of the Smart Cities initiative so that the university could do work for connectivity and automated vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there's, in fact, under the Biden administration, there's more money coming out of the DOE and DOT than there has been definitely under the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other question that we have is, how do you balance the need for technology innovation in smart transportation and something that I'm not familiar with? This person called it nudge control. And I'm not familiar with that term, so I don't know what that is. Do either of you, are you familiar with that term?
I'm sorry, I'm not. I looked at the question online. I'm not sure what that nudge means.
Nudge control, you know, yeah, nudge theory. Someone's popping up with that. No, I don't think that's helping us. But how do you balance the need for technology innovation within smart transportation? I think is an interesting question in and of itself. Carla, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, let me just look at the question again. Technology innovation and smart transportation.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most interesting things that we've seen as we've looked at connected and automated vehicles, because if you would have asked in 2014, when everyone was developing autonomous driving solutions and technology, everyone said it's going to be ready in 3 years.
Yeah.
And fundamentally it was. we have the LiDAR, the radar, we have the systems.
Yeah.
But integrating that technology into real world is where the problems came. And then from there, we found problems with the technology. Right. Because the technology was far from perfect. And we've discovered that the more miles that we put on the roadways. So and then when you integrate it into the roadways, when you try to put an automated vehicle or a computer operated vehicle with a human operated vehicle, that just increases the combinations and permutations that you have to validate and then program into the artificial intelligence of that product. So it's a lot more technologically complex than we thought. And, you know, when I mentioned earlier that I think we're going to have these areas of solely automated vehicles, that can be controlled because you've got only computer operated vehicles. Mm-hmm. Now, that also is based on the assumption that we're going to have some rulemaking that these vehicles, even made by different people with different algorithms, are going to behave similarly or at least follow the same rules. Mm-hmm. And this is where public policy regulations have to come into play to make these standards so that when we have a Ford with a Toyota and with a BMW, that we know what each one of them is going to do. And when we get to a four-way intersection, that one of them won't just sit there forever because its algorithms are different than the other two. And these are things that have to be tested and tried out. So again, technology is great, but you have to test it and you have to put it into all the different settings and scenarios to confirm and validate that it's going to be workable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I think some of our researchers at the U of M Transportation Research Institute, they were pulling their hair out when they first heard about not necessarily for full autonomy, but actually partial autonomy actually became they see it as a bigger challenge
I agree.
because of the need for the driver to become reacquainted with what's going on after they have taken their eyes off the road. And we all know that the a 1001, 1002, 1003 timeframe might be too long. They were saying, and they're still doing research on this, right? You know, it's part of their distraction research, right? So, but when you're bringing these new technologies in, and the idea that you can take your hands off the wheel and not pay attention is a really dangerous program.
Absolutely. And we just saw, you know, that the differences that exist between the companies that have ProPilot and Cadillac Cruise and other systems.
Yeah.
They're all different.
Yeah.
And some of them do a pretty good job of seeing that the driver's distracted, and others you can fake out.
Yeah.
You know, just put your hand on the wheel every so often while you're watching a movie. Well, this is really quite scary.
Yeah.
Because people, once they're disengaged, data's shown it's 7 to 40 some seconds before they're going to be cognizant again. And by that time,
it's way too late.
Way too late.
Way too late.
And we've seen that play out.
Xiaotang, are you seeing these issues playing out in your research with trucks?
You mean the partial autonomy?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. So one of my research is focusing on truck platooning. So people always argue, okay, truck platooning does not save any labor at all, because all the human beings should be on board.
Yeah.
Right. If you're on board, you are paid. We are not saving anything.
Right.
But in the meantime, well, it kind of release their longitudinal control effort. Right. They only need to care about the lateral control.
Mm-hmm.
So we still need to have more, like not only from papers, from equations, from all these type of research. We need to have more human machine interaction research to create different scenarios and to see, well, how people will react. But the difficulty is that we cannot predict all the real scenarios, right? There are always some unexpected scenarios come out.
Yes.
And how are we going to deal with it? This is always a challenging research question.
Yeah. And which is why we're so focused on areas that are well known, that are easier, where vehicles can drive slower, that they're geo-fenced, so they stay within a certain area. Either in a city or, maybe in an airport or something like that. Maybe having their own lane, which is, I think that's what they're working on that road that is proposed between Ann Arbor and Detroit, where they're working on doing an autonomous vehicle or connected vehicle lane that would go between Ann Arbor and Detroit, and that would be I would say not just a test facility, but actually moving people and moving goods.
Right.
So that's something that's going on right now. Carla, I see from our questions here that nudge control has now become budget control. I
looked at nudge control and I get it. So what they're talking about is really providing incentives to change behavior.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that we hotly debate in smart cities. Do you use a carrot or a stick? And we see both being deployed globally.
Yeah.
Where they say after a certain date, no more internal combustion engines are allowed here.
Yeah.
That's a stick.
Yeah.
And then you see others where there's a platform in the United States called Hitch, and it might be global, I'm not sure. But in this, you get rewarded by sharing rides with somebody within your company.
Mhm.
So it can be used within a company to provide incentives to promote ride sharing. And then you get certain number of points, and then you get things, you know, kind of like your Starbucks card. If you get a certain number, you buy a certain amount, you get something free. So using that kind of incentive to drive behavior change.
Mhm.
And it's a hot debate. And I think we need to do a lot more trials to see what's going to work.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
know the stick, of course, is a way to make it happen. And, you know, then you've got dissatisfied people. Incentivization seems to be more palatable, but is it enough to really change behavior?
Mhm.
These are the
Mhm.
kinds of debates that we had when we were talking about, you know, electrification and other things.
Yeah. Carla, I think that they were focusing on in this question, this balancing technology with budget. How do you, when you look at the projects that you work on, and how do you have the technology innovation that you want to bring forward, for example, a MOS app, and budget control for how do you actually spend them, where do you get the money to actually make all this stuff happen?
Yeah, and you're spending the citizens' money, which means you're under the microscope.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
spending it. And I think this is where the private-public partnerships are so important.
Mhm.
Because you can't, it's not fair for businesses to say to the city, you need to find a way for my employees to get to work. And it's not fair for the city to say to businesses, everybody in your business has to have a car. You know, deal with it somehow, raise your salaries, whatever.
Yeah.
But if they work together, they can often find a mutually satisfactory solution, which each putting skin in the game.
Yeah.
Because money is finite. And what I often tell cities is try something, pick one neighborhood and try something, deploy very small, try to perfect it, and then begin to expand it. What we often want to do, especially with public transit, is we want to make this big solution and deploy it all at once, and it's going to be good for 10 years. That's ridiculous in this era of technology. You've got to be constantly evolving, which means doing things much smaller scale, learning from it, growing it, and continuing to evolve it. Don't think it can stay stationary.
I think we're running out of time, guys, and I want to thank you both for your participation. I thought we had a very good discussion. I learned a few things here and there, as usual, which is one of the reasons I like to participate in these discussions. For the audience, there is a QR code to fill out the survey about your user experience, and to also to do that through social media by scanning that QR code. And Xiaoteng, I want to thank you for your time. You're in Hong Kong right now, so it's you're just beginning your day. Carla, you're ending your day, and we will again thank you all for your time, and maybe we'll see you later on.
Thank you, Bruce. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Carla. Nice discussion.
you.
Nice to talk to you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Hello，我们现在还有什么需要给明天 update 吗？
我们这个会议还有观众吗？
Good question.
I think 纪委可以把那个直播停了。
纪委在外面，他说他用手机试一下能不能关。
还有那个 streaming live streaming 也关一下。